Darren Detweiler. Darren is an adjunct professor with the Northeast University College of Professional Studies. He's also the senior policy coordinator for Stop Foodborne Illness. And Darren tragically lost his son in 1993 to an E. coli outbreak, and has since that time dedicated much of his work to working with FDA and USDA for some 20 years.
Thank you very much, and I'd like to thank everyone, the attendees, the presenters, and especially the organizers for holding such an event. And I'm decided not to wear a tie and jacket today, of course. Nor did I bring a PowerPoint presentation, which could be a good thing or a bad thing. Hopefully it'll be a good thing here today. As was said before, my name is Darren Detweiler, and if you'd asked me 22 years ago if I would be standing here today, I would have said you're crazy. From a consumer standpoint, and I do want to point out that we talk about so many things as an us versus them, group A, group B, blue, red, all these different kind of things. When it comes to the consumer perspective, every single one of us in this room could stand up here right now. We are all consumers. Whether we're involved in regulatory, whether we're involved in industry, it doesn't matter. We are all consumers. And the very young, the very unskilled, untrained entry worker in the food industry through the highest paid, most experienced, most educated executive in the food industry, again, all consumers. From my perspective, a deathbed of your child is a horrible place to learn about such things as E. coli. And I talk to families on a regular basis. And for the most part, one of those things that I don't tell them, but I do tell myself, is that if I am talking to families, one of the worst things that could possibly happen in their lives has already taken place. They are either dealing with the death of a young family member, usually under the age of 5, or perhaps a parent, or they're dealing with an illness that results in long-term, lifelong medical issues, complications, questions, fears. And in many cases, it comes down to, I had no idea. I assumed this problem was taken care of. I assumed that was not an issue, that the government fixed this, that the industry had made this change. Or I had no idea that I was supposed to be doing this. I had no idea I wasn't supposed to be doing that. There's a lot of assumptions that consumers, whether it be in the house or if it's perhaps in the restaurant, take for granted every day. And one thing that I think that every single one of us in this room, or who should be in this room, needs to take into consideration is that every single consumer assumes that the food that they purchase, the food that they consume, is the best quality, and that food will not come with a side of fear. And unfortunately, too many people do run into that fear. 20 years ago-ish, if you were talking about food safety, you were mostly talking about E. coli, ground beef, hamburger, things of that sort. That was the, at the time, the food safety issue du jour, if you will. People referred to the 1993 Jack in the Box E. coli outbreak as the 9/11 of the food industry. And I've been in meetings for the last couple of weeks. In fact, last week I was at the National Food Policy Conference with some people in this room, and the 1993 Jack in the Box issue came up. That was followed by the FDA's FSMA public meeting kickoff Thursday and Friday last week, again during which the 1993 Jack in the Box E. coli outbreak was discussed. It gets discussed for a reason. Before that, there really was no overall public awareness of this idea of food safety as an issue. That the things that you take for granted, that you've taken for granted for most of your life, could come with a consequence. Somewhere in my background, believe it or not, I was also a history teacher. And if you go back far enough in history, there was two kinds of cave people, if you will, if we'll use that term. There was the kind of cave people that would see some small furry creature coming towards them and they'd say, hey, that might kill me. I need to take some action. And it came towards them, and whether or not it tried to kill them, they were taking some kind of proactive action. There's also the kind of cave people who saw that same small furry creature coming towards them, and they said, oh, it's probably going to be cute. I should just let me get close to it and pet it. And sometimes that was okay, and sometimes that ended in their ultimate demise. Today we talk about stranger danger. We talk about internet safety, making sure that our young teens and preteens are safe when they're on the internet. We talk about crossing the street, looking both ways. We make certain assumptions that there could be a problem. Maybe it's worst case scenario, if you will. But somehow when it comes to food, we really have this sense of it's going to be fine. It's by nature, it's a reputable company. I've seen this company name before, or that product, I eat it all the time. It's got to be fine. And part of the problem is that there's certain terminology that's used that almost kind of paints an incorrect picture. I was at a meeting last week on Friday with someone who was consulting with the USDA, and they were talking about mechanically tenderized beef. I won't get into a discussion about that, but a comment that was made raised an interesting kind of perspective. This person said that it's only the vulnerable populations, the very young, the very old or elderly, and those who have an immune system that's been compromised somehow, that get sick from foodborne illness. And we started to move on with that conversation, and I had to stop and say, no, actually it's not. Everyone gets sick from foodborne illness. Healthy adults, maybe from age 7 years old up, people who have an immune system that's strong, we all get sick from foodborne illness. How many people in this room, raise your hand or not, have said something to the effect of, my stomach, it must be something I ate? We can all say that. Our immune system is strong enough to handle this. It doesn't mean that we don't get sick, but it creates this image, this perspective that, again, only certain populations get sick. Back in 1993, when my son got sick, I assumed it was going to be my older son, who was 9 years old, not my 16-month-old son. I had just gotten out of the Navy. I thought I was an educated person. I was operating a nuclear reactor on a billion-dollar submarine, and yet I had never heard of E. coli. And so I said, well, hey, let's be proactive. Let's not eat at that restaurant. Let's not eat that product, and we'll be fine. Had no idea that my son was going to get sick, let alone end up in Children's Hospital in Seattle. And I obviously had no idea, even the day I woke up that morning to learn that my son, there was no turning back, that he would die that day, that he would die. But I think what's kind of important to note is that he never ate a hamburger. He never ate a hamburger. He never ate the hamburger that killed him. Because there are so many people that were sick during that outbreak, mostly the children, who actually got sick because their older siblings and their parents got sick from eating the product, but were not washing their hands. They were continuing on like normal in the house, in the kitchen, going about their daily business. They were sick with, quote-unquote, something that they ate, and had no idea that they were passing on a pathogen, person to person, to their young family members. I immediately found myself dealing with not only the issue of having gone from having a family member so young being involved with foodborne illness to having lost a child, to talking with President Clinton, talking with then Secretary of Agriculture Mike Espy, working with them to bring about certain change. Back then, change at the federal government level was at the USDA level. We looked at public education. We looked at food safe handling labels, which have actually been on packages of raw meat and poultry for some 20 years now. Though it's amazing how many audiences I talk to about these food safe handling labels, and they have no idea that they even exist. I work with the USDA with the food-borne illness issue in terms of the pathogen reduction plan, the early steps to make some difference back then. Then About 10 years later, I started working with the FDA. I ended up getting certified as a food science educator, and that was followed up by my working with the USDA again as a special regulatory policy advisor to the Secretary of Agriculture. I talk about these things because I found that over the course of 10 years and now 20 years that it's bounced back. It's not just one food. It's not just one pathogen. It shifted from more of the focus being with the USDA to now a lot more of this focus being with the FDA. And with the Food Safety Modernization Act, the focus isn't even just purely on the FDA. If you read the Food Safety Modernization Act, and I'm sure a lot of us in this audience have, you don't have to get too many paragraphs after the index before you start realizing how many federal agencies now have to be coordinated and collaborated and now have to work with the FDA in order for the USDA to be successful in the goal. I think you were presenting, Ms. Wagner, last week, and you were presenting the actual ultimate goal of the Food Safety Modernization Act. And a woman next to me said, to reduce the risk of foodborne illness, shouldn't the goal be to eliminate foodborne illness? And I said, I know it would sound like an obvious goal would be to eliminate foodborne illness, but realize that's impossible. That is absolutely impossible to 100% eliminate foodborne illness. But to reduce it would give us something where we can actually have some metrics to evaluate, to determine how close are we to achieving that goal. With reducing the risk of foodborne illness, we could see how various stakeholders, and we all play a role, but various stakeholders from the farm to the fork can take actions to reduce the risk, whether it be hand washing, whether it be understanding cross-contamination, whether it be using a thermometer and understanding the proper temperatures, whether it be understanding sell-by dates or things other than sell-by dates to be able to identify what might be an indicator that this food is no longer safe, not just in terms of quality, but in terms of safety. Should I wash a raw chicken in my kitchen sink? Should I wash fruits and vegetables? If I am a vegetarian, does that mean that I won't get sick from foodborne illness or from a culprit food involving meat? And believe me, these questions are ones I field almost every day. I talked recently with a woman from Georgia. She's 73 years old. She spent almost 80 days in the hospital, and it turns out that she got E. coli from some meat that was being cooked at a barbecue establishment. And she goes, the thing that confuses me the most is that I'm a vegetarian, and I went there with a group after church, and we had a salad. Very ill woman. And the investigation revealed that a worker there was running late, was busy, had a lot to do, and had finished preparing meat that was going to go onto skewers to be slow roasted over a fire, and used the same exact cutting tools and cutting prep area to then prepare the salad foods for the day, and transfer the foodborne pathogen from the meat to the salad. The lettuce, leafy greens, etc. Investigation revealed that he should have known better. He was fired. He had been working there for many years. But it's not necessarily what we hear in terms of people who are too new, too inexperienced, too untrained. Sometimes it's a culture shift in terms of even those employees who have been working in this field for a very long time. Going back to the idea of we're all consumers, I can't avoid food. Look at me, I can't avoid food. There's some foods I don't eat nearly as much as I used to. There's some foods that I avoid because I associate with the death of my son. But people ask me all the time, Darren, man, what foods do you avoid? And you'd be surprised. I don't really have like this big long list of foods that I avoid. If I had a list of foods I avoid, it would be like one of those rolls that goes across the floor. I do avoid certain foods. But what I usually talk about is practices. There's things that I look for when I go to a restaurant. Do I see a lack of hand washing? Do I see someone who's literally handling the cash register or handling the trash and then going to be handling food? Do I see conditions behind the counter that just do not look like the kind of conditions that I would be okay with in terms of if I was going to eat that food? And believe me, I've seen sometimes some of the worst things. I was at a pizza place once, and this person was on the phone, typing in orders on the computer, and took money and handled a credit card, and then he went and he grabbed a raw ball of dough and started pressing it onto the thing. And I go, whoa, 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 whoa. You just handle all that with your bare hands, and now your bare hands are all over my dough you're going to put in the oven for me. And he turns to me and he goes, dude. And of course, I want to see where this is going to go. He goes, and I'm going to quote, so pardon my French. Dude, I know what I'm doing, and believe me, whatever shit I put onto this, it's going to get cooked out by the time it gets through the oven. Those should not be words that any consumer hears, let alone me. This stuff happens. How many people in this room have seen something questionable or have heard something out of someone's mouth and said, you just put your foot in it? You're talking to the audience that knows far too much that you really should not have said that to me. But here's the thing. How many people have been in that situation and actually said something? How many people have been in that situation and haven't said something? How many people have felt that because you said something, you are the bad guy? It's amazing how we have the power as consumers. Whether we vote with our money, whether we vote with what we purchase, whether it be organic or GMO, non-GMO, gluten-free, from this restaurant, from that store, bulk, specialty item, imported or not, we have the ability to vote with our purchase abilities, or where we put our money. And yet sometimes we just kind of hand over food safety to people, even though we stand there and look at conditions where we're like, yeah, I'll probably be all right. This food safety culture, it's kind of the buzzword of the last few months. I spent 15 years in education. I taught math, I taught science, I taught history to high school students, middle school students. And during that time, I was working with the USDA, and I was also brought out to speak before a meat association at a conference. And the question that I was asked to address was, what is the state of food safety education in public schools? How many people in this room have children, and your children came home and said, Mom, Dad, we talked about food safety today in science class, or in history class, or in foods class? I say there's zero state of food safety education in our schools. And if you think about it, here is a population, especially at the middle school level, here is a population where we are going to be sending this group of people off. They're going to be starting to go to eat on their own with their friends, be going to restaurants, spending money that you gave them. They're going to start buying groceries at grocery stores. They're going to even be starting to make food at home. Even if it's things that come out of the freezer, they throw it in the microwave for however long they want. And they're not using a thermometer, and they just get home and they just throw something in the microwave kind of a thing. And they're not going to consider the idea of food safety. Here are people that are going to end up in their later teens being the next entry-level people at a grocery store, at a food facility, at a retail, at a restaurant. And we hear today that idea that more and more of these entry-level employees know less and less about food safety. And yet they're consumers. They should be growing up. They should know about this stuff. It's a culture change. Last week, there was a question about calling salmonella an adulterant, asked directly of Brian Ronholm of the USDA. And he referred back to a Supreme Court decision from the 70s. And if you read that Supreme Court decision, it says that unlike ground beef, chicken is only cooked one way. And those who work in the food industry and housewives know how to cook chicken. I quote. End quote. We definitely have a culture change. Whether we're looking at the home, retail, the restaurant, the industry, even policymakers, federal regulatory agencies, and our Supreme Court, we have a lot of change that we need to make in terms of this culture of food safety. And I think I want to close in basically saying that 20 years ago, it was the USDA, and what are we going to do in response to the 1993 Jack in the Box E. coli outbreak? Today, it's the FDA, and what are we going to do with the Food Safety Modernization Act? We can say that it's a response to the 2006 E. coli in spinach. We could probably point to some other things. Some people say there's a little bit of deja vu in terms of the beginning of Clinton's administration, the beginning of President Obama's administration in terms of these different food events. I am not convinced that 20 years from now or so, or one or two presidents' administrations, there's not going to be some other significant food safety concern that's going to basically say that we need to review what shortfalls there were with Food Safety Modernization Act, or what loopholes there were in terms of gaps, if you will, with our food safety culture or our awareness on a large-scale level. But the Food Safety Modernization Act does provide, even for someone like me, someone for whom I truly believe that the words from a Queen song, in which it's always a rainy day without you, yet I do believe that I can tell you from experience of 22 years after the loss of my son, that it is very possible to have very good, very successful, very productive, and even very happy days when it's raining outside. The Food Safety Modernization Act provides me with some hope, but even more so I feel hope in terms of the industry and all the partners in food safety and food protection in terms of their response to this current, with the Food Safety Modernization Act and the partnerships, again, from the federal, state, and local levels. The overall hope that I get from this is that we can actually make a difference. We can actually reduce the risk of foodborne illness, and that perhaps others don't have to go through what too many people have gone through already in terms of learning about foodborne illness when it's already too late. With that, I thank you. Again, thank you, attendees, presenters, and organizers. And I wish us all the best of luck as we go forward, doing what I hope we and many others will do best, and making sure that families do not serve the family meal with a side of fear. Thank you very much.